Okay, so we're gonna try this again. Had a little bit of technical difficulties, and today I have Humanity Forever with me. He's also known as Netscape, for his former pseudonym or whatever you want to call his name on the internet. So just talk a little bit about what you're doing lately, and for those who haven't heard about you.
All right. So I'm Humanity Forever. You might know me as Netscape, which I went by through for most of Gamergate, and I run a YouTube channel talking about issues in gaming and also politics to a lesser extent. And I'm also working on a book about Gamergate. I've actually finished the rough draft. I've sent that to Anderdal, and I just have to finish the final draft here and wait for the cover art to be done, and it'll be released.
Okay. And so, what inspired you to do the book?
Well, I've wanted to write a book about Gamergate for a couple of years now because I was really dissatisfied with how the media covered Gamergate, as most of us were. I felt as though the media really painted a one-sided picture, and I wanted to create the full history of Gamergate, or at least to cover the main events that happened during Gamergate and what it was like for the people involved in the debate and the conversation and the movement.
Okay. And was it something specifically you wanted to cover with this book?
Well, I wanted to create the history of Gamergate, so most of the book focuses on that. I have got 3 chapters focused specifically on the history of Gamergate. I've also got a lot of it is also focused on what it's like from inside the community. So I have an entire chapter dedicated to what it's like as someone who is involved in these conversations, in this debate, in this movement, if you want to call it that. And then I also want to provide some feedback and advice on how we can move forward as a society, as gamers, and try to fix the problems that led to Gamergate in the first place. So I try to, especially in the last chapter, take an analytical approach about everything that's happened with the culture war and how we can try to fix the problems that lead to the development of a culture war in the first place.
Okay, and because I've read the intro. I still have to read through the rest of what you've given me access to. So I've seen the chapters, and because Grim Jim, he also made a book about Gamergate, and I think I haven't read the 2 last chapters. I almost read the entire thing, and that was more of a contextual, I would say, contextual book of how did we get to this place, what happened during the past, and led up to why people came out with Gamergate and with the hashtag. So it was a little bit more of contextual, perhaps not as the take you're going to do. I saw you streaming with him as well. Did you talk about him about the different approaches you had with him as well?
We did. So, like you said, he tries to take more of a contextual approach and tries to explain what it was like and why this happened. And I also focus on why it happened as well, but I try to take more of an objective approach. So I'm not here necessarily to, fully articulate the views of Gamergate. I'm not here to push a pro Gamergate narrative or an anti Gamergate narrative. Obviously, I have my biases, and I make that clear up front in the prologue. I make it clear what my biases are, but I try to approach it from a neutral perspective and provide a lot of sources. I have over 200 sources in the book covering the events and also quoting people and articles and things like that about what people's thoughts and feelings on both sides of the debate were on these topics. So I try to be as objective as possible so that any random person, like your mother or your father, could go to a bookstore and pick this up and they'd understand what happened.
Because compared to Grim Jim's book, Immediately what I noticed was where you were actually quoting articles and people for your introduction, which Grim Jim he didn't do. He took a more of a personal approach and how he viewed things. He didn't go and say this is how things are. He just gave kind of, as I said, with the context and how he experienced things were leading up to, and probably a little bit more personal because I think the first 2 or 3 pages of this book are pretty personal. It kind of opens with a bang. So you take a kind of a more neutral approach, and you cite sources and articles and. Um, I still have to read the rest as I've said, but it's a I would say it's a different approach. What was what were your thoughts when you what kind of sources you were going to use for that book?
Well, I tried to avoid Twitter sources as much as possible. There are a few times where I reference Twitter because that's what someone said or it's a quote from someone on Twitter, but I mostly try to look at articles, look at videos that people made, look at things that people went out there and it took a lot of effort to put out. Because, on Twitter, first of all, I'm not sure how representative of a community Twitter can be of either side, because you have a lot of different communities on Twitter, and it does something that, say, Anita Sarkeesian tweeted out that has 50 retweets, right? Does something like that represents the entirety of anti-Gamergate? Probably not. And Twitter is where we go to give our worst takes. Twitter is well known for trolling and hot takes, where you're just going to throw something out there and you're going to forget about it. So it's not people putting a great deal of thought behind their tweets usually, and it's usually not their most articulate, their most in-depth, and their most nuanced perspectives. So I tried to avoid that as much as possible.
Yeah, because I saw you actually cited a video with Boogie and transcribed what he said in one of his videos. So that was something I hadn't seen before as well.
Yes, the first 2 chapters very much do focus on quotes to sort of give people an idea of what people were thinking at the time and what the various narratives going on were. And I do take a more personal approach in chapter 6, though. Chapter 6 is where I try to take myself out of the book for almost all of it. And then in chapter 6, I give my own personal perspective as someone who was involved.
Okay. And would you, let's say, in 5 years, would you perhaps revisit the aftermath as you because you saw from what I saw from the chapters was the future and what happens after getting it. Would you perhaps revisit the topic in say 5-10 years?
Probably. I mean, 5 years. That's going to be the 10-year anniversary of Gamergate. So
Yeah.
that's going to be that's probably going to warrant a video in its own right. If I'm still on YouTube at the time, who knows what's going to happen? But I could definitely revisit that, and also revisit what my suggestions were for moving forward, and to see if those suggestions were taken to heart. I cover a lot of different things. A lot of them are societal issues, and those societal issues are not going to be easy to address in the short term. I think a lot of this stuff stems from, well, think of it like this, right? You're dealing with people on both sides of this debate. At the end of the day, you're dealing with human beings, and human beings are unique. They are nuanced. They have a lot going on in their real life, and they respond to motives. They respond to incentives. They respond to what's going on in the world around them. And so people on both sides, regardless of how you're coming at this as an SJW or as a anti-SJW or someone who's stuck in the middle, right? Regardless of how you look at this whole culture war affair, you're still a human being, and you have desires and needs, and some of these desires and needs are deeply to the core of who we are as human beings. You desire community, you desire friendships, you desire social bonds, you desire meaning and purpose in life. And I think a lot of what is causing the culture war is the fact that people feel as though they've lost these things. And so that's not going to be an easy thing to fix. That's not going to be something that in 5 years is going to be 100% solved. This is going to be a societal conversation and how we can better equip people and provide the incentives to equip people with a sense of purpose and meaning in life. And that's not an easy task to solve. So I'm not sure in 5 years we're going to see great strides forward.
Yeah, but in regards to, sorry, my controller was going off on its own. I left the PlayStation on. So, but when looking at the aftermath, because we are in the aftermath now, in regards to Gamergate, do you see Gamergate kind of the culture war seeping into other mediums? Because we have Comicsgate and we have the culture within Star Wars and general movies now as well. Would you say that Gamergate is kind of the start of it, or just it has some correlation, or what would your analysis be?
Well, I would say that it was the start of it, but but I'm not ad hoc ergo propter hoc, right? Just because something started first does not mean it's the cause of other things. A lot of this stuff would have happened probably regardless, right? And there's two aspects of this, right? There's the aspect of people trying to politicize everything, which is coming from the sort of social justice camp, right? Everything is political. Everything has a political narrative, whether you want it to or not. That's sort of an idea that they have. But also part of it stems from our society. We've had a breakdown in civil society. And so now the things that in the past would unite us, in the past would be ways for us to escape partisanship, escape politics, and just enjoy a sporting event or a movie or a cultural event as a society together, putting aside our biases, putting aside our politics. In the past, we used to be able to do that, but now we are no longer able to. And you see this with all different types of things. You see it with Star Wars, like you said. You see it with comic books, with movies, with video games. Everything is a culture war battle. Even something like sports, right? The Super Bowl and the kneelers a couple years ago. Everything has become politicized. Now everyone has to have an opinion, a take on the political situation in regards to all of these different mediums and all of these different entertainment outlets. And that is a negative force in our society. We have to have the things where we can step away from politics, step away from the bully pulpit, and be able to enjoy things with our friends, with our family, without it being controversial. And so we have to, but that is a symptom, though. That is a symptom of the breakdown of our civil society.
Yeah, I mean, you said everything was political. I mean, I just made a
Well,
video.
that's their perspective. That's their perspective, not mine.
Yeah, but I just wanted to say everything is political because I just made a video about Gillette and basically backtracking, and I mean even razors have become political these days.
Yes, everything is, and we have to move away from this. And I'm not really sure how. I'm not sure how we get to a point where we no longer have this cultural conflict over every single issue, whether it's sports or what razor company you support. We cannot live in a world where Republicans watch one thing and Democrats watch another, right? We cannot live in a world where, depending on where your social leanings are, you're not going to watch the Super Bowl, or you're going to die hard and watch the Super Bowl 8 times and record it and purchase an all access stream because you want to support them because of their politics. We have to find some way to navigate these conversations in a way that we can avoid destroying the social fabric of society, and where we can avoid the politicization of everything. And I'm not sure how we get there, other than by addressing the underlying causes of the problems of why people are unhappy.
Yeah, because even I saw Tim Pool, I believe it was a week or two ago, where he covered one of the Proud Boys basically getting his bank account shut down. So he said, at worst case scenario, there are even going to be two separate economies, where you have one side using things like Patreon and PayPal, and you have the other side trying to use other means to pay for things. And that would be the worst case scenario, where you separate basically even the economy and how people spend the money, and where you have people blocking, being censored right now, but that would be a very bad result of this culture war where people can't even use certain outlets to spend the money.
That's absolutely right. So we have to avoid that. And also, we're seeing a lot of other downstream effects of this breakdown of society and breakdown of people's feeling of purpose and meaning, right? Really, the culture war is just the tip of the spear. You also have a lot of other downstream effects. We see an increase in mental health for young people, a decrease in mental health, rather, for young people. And this is well documented by the work of Jonathan Haidt. And it's not just that people feel like they're unhappy now. There's actually an increase in suicide rates, both among young people, young girls especially, but also among middle-aged men. And actually, life expectancy in the United States is declining and has been declining for the past 3 years because, in part, because of suicide rates are increasing, and also in part because of the opioid crisis, right? People are finding meaning and purpose in other ways that are less than healthy. They're finding it through their politics, and they're also finding it through drug and alcohol abuse, which is not a healthy way to go about your life and is ending a lot of lives.
Yeah, and I think just generally that, especially with, I see this as demasculization of, especially video games and comic book, because they've been mostly for guys and boys as a space, and now you have these identitarians. Look, nobody's. I'm just talking about general. Of course, there have been females who have been into comic books, and there are female comic book heroes. Wonder Woman is the oldest female comic book hero. I think 75 years old or something like that. And so, of course, but I see this especially when it comes to hobbies that men particularly have, where you have these HGWs coming in and wanting to change things because either they're popular or they just want to change it to fit them. That's just my observation.
Yes, I'm not really sure how I would classify that though. Obviously, it's a positive thing or a neutral thing, really, if more women enjoy these hobbies, right? There's nothing wrong if women want to enjoy video games or comic books, and they have for decades, like you said. And I think the problem though is this idea that we have this blank slate notion, right?
Did you drop?
It's true, right? There's social factors in our society that push people in certain directions. Am I cutting out? And there are also
Yeah, just less than seconds.
Sorry. Right. So there's a lot of there's a lot of social factors that affect the way people are socialized, the way people are raised, right? And to that extent, you could say that gender is a social construct or what have you, right? But there's also a lot of biological factors as well and evolutionary psychology factors that lead people to make the decisions that they make, to lead people to enjoy certain things more than others. And so they have this notion that if video games, like let's say Call of Duty, right? Let's say if Call of Duty had more female characters in it. You could play as female characters in multiplayer, the female one in the campaign, that there was less sexualization, not that there really is in Call of Duty, and that maybe they toned down the violence a little bit, that women would jump at Call of Duty. It would be 50-50 split. But that is unlikely to be the case because men and women like different things, and that's okay. And of course, we're talking about on average here, right? There's going to be exceptions to the rule, of course.
We're just talking about general.
Yes, in general. So they have this idea that, if we just made changes to Call of Duty or Halo, then we'd see a 50-50 gender split. But that's not going to be the case because those types of games don't necessarily appeal to women as much as they do to men. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There should be a place in this industry for all types of games to be made, right? There's place for Undertale and Life is Strange, which might appeal more to a female demographic. And there's also place for Call of Duty or Halo or Mass Effect, which might appeal more to a male demographic. There's not a deliberate attempt to keep women out of games or to make it so that these games are unappealing to women. It's just that women are going to be less likely to play these games, and regardless of how many female characters you put in Halo, that's not going to change.
That is true, and the reason why I posed the question because I see a lot of
Accept that and
gender.
understand that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it was just there's a lot of gender swapping, and as you say, inserting female characters where they don't really have any place to be. Um, just one. The last year, Gogeta. I don't know how you say it in English. From Dragon Ball, Gogeta, I think it's called. Can you give humanity a brief anime gate concerning Vic and otherwise how it
Yes,
compares?
please. I have no idea about this. I've heard about it. People keep asking me about it. I don't know anything about it. Please tell me.
Well, because I would follow you at this, but Yellow Flash would be probably the best person to under Rakido law. Those are the guys who are most up to. But from what I've seen and know, is that Vic Mignogna, the voice actor for Broly in the new Dragon Ball Super series, or I don't know what the new series is going to be called, and the movie is basically he was accused of sexually assaulting and uh, basically being accused of doing some things against women, and there was no evidence of this, and it ended up being where they showed pictures of him hugging small girls and kissing them, and they were saying that this was basically him assaulting girls and being a pedophile and sexually assaulting girls, even though one of the girls which they used a picture of said they met 10 years ago and Vic was nothing but lovely and warm and heartwarming to them. And you have he was fired from Funimation, he was fired from Rooster Teeth, and he's basically lost all of his jobs because of these accusations, which had no evidence with them, and now he's suing them. And it was even his coworkers that came against that said he was guilty of this. And Monica Rial, who has the voice of Bulma in Dragon Ball. She's basically the biggest one of his. I know Chris Sabat has a voice for Vegeta, and Sean Schemmel have also gone against him, but Sean Schemmel backtracked a little bit. I'm not sure about Chris Sabat though, but they basically ostracized him as well. Even though afterwards there have been pictures of Monica Rial kissing small boys and doing the exact same things as he did. So that's just my understanding of the situation.
Okay, so how has Anime Gate really taken off? I see people talking about it on Twitter a lot, but what exactly are their demands, or what exactly is it that they want? Are they wanting him to be rehired, or are they wanting them to rethink their approach to these issues?
They just want him, from what I understand, as I said, this is just from what I know, I haven't looked into all of it, is I think the people want him to be rehired, and if there is some evidence, that people should bring the evidence forward. But there haven't been no police charges or anything to suggest. No, he might have done any of these things. I personally don't know, but that's just my understanding that if there is no evidence, he should be rehired, and he should not have been fired for false accusations. That's just my understanding.
Okay, so I can't speak to the specifics of this case, but I think Last Go Getter is absolutely right. Innocent until proven guilty is the main thrust. This is something we have to sort of come to terms with as a society, not just in the anime community, but we also see it with the Supreme Court, right? I made a video defending Brett Kavanaugh because there was no evidence of the claims. And in fact, there were some issues with her story. And we see this more and more and more with high-profile figures getting fired, having mobs go after them on social media because they allegedly did something wrong. And maybe they did, maybe they didn't. And even Neil deGrasse Tyson recently actually just got accused of something like this. where there's just no evidence one way or the other. And we have to be able to look at these situations, weigh the evidence, and come to a conclusion like that. Not just assume that every single accusation is true. Not just assume that someone is a terrible person because someone said so, or they did something wrong because someone said so. We have to weigh the evidence. We have to look at these objectively, look at these situations objectively, and let the police do their jobs and let people investigate. But right now, with Me Too and things like that, we aren't able to do that. Right now, we have this fear of sexual harassment in our society, and a lot of that is justified, right? There are, especially in certain industries, a lot of bad people out there, right? You see in Hollywood, people like Harvey Weinstein and abusing their power and getting people to sleep with them. And you see with like Matt Hickey, for instance, one of the anti-Gamergaters who got arrested, where he was promising people gigs and movies and stuff if they did porn shots with him. And then it was all just a ploy for him to have sex with women, right? So there are bad people out there, no doubt about it. And even in less common fields, everyone talks about business, everyone talks about Hollywood, everyone talks about, and they say, the anime world. But there are instances of sexual harassment in the real world. I've worked in restaurants. I've worked as a server. I've been sexually harassed myself. And just drunk people, they slap your ass and stuff. It happens. It happens. I've had a drunk guy slap my ass before and hit on me. It's really awkward. It's really weird. And I can only imagine if you're a very attractive woman, right? You're a very attractive woman. You probably get that more than I would certainly get that, especially when you're dealing with a lot of intoxicated people, or you're dealing with someone who has a lot of power over you in Hollywood or something along those lines. And those people should get their comeuppance. They should lose their jobs. But we have to approach this in a way where we don't lose sight of our values as a society, that people are innocent until proven guilty. And where you can't just assume that someone is guilty just because there's an accusation or two accusations against them.
Yeah, because I was also the same thing happened to me. I would say probably she was a grandma and started groping me, so it's happened to me as well. And but I see this when it comes to this particular band of people who throw out these accusations, because Las Gogeta or Gogeta, there's even a fake swatting that a Funimation staff member claimed Samantha in your heart or something said big fans did it, and it was an old photo as well. So there might be more to these things, and we know that Funimation and the when it comes to localizing, for example, to English, a lot of things get often censored. I mean, they even included the Gamergate line into
Prison School, right, or something along those lines. I remember that.
Yeah. So it's really nothing new. I mean, it's anime, it's comics, it's even some games. Nintendo Treehouse is notorious.
Yeah, Fire Emblem Fates and Tokyo Mirage Sessions. I talk about that in the book too, about how these localization companies are not giving us the exact product. Like even if they made a couple of minor changes, right, due to cultural issues. Like if there's a reference to some Japanese TV show that most, like 99% of Westerners haven't heard of, right? I'd be more or less okay with that, because that makes sense to change that to make it more local to the audience that you're preaching it to. But when you're seeing these drastic changes over perceived cultural insensitivity on the West, or because they want to push an agenda, that's really toxic. And I think that's a huge problem with Japanese games coming to the West now.
Yeah, I'm just looking here. Sort of like how Metacritic sometimes has fans like or hate things more than fans. A lot of conflicts or translation, like you two say as well. Yeah, because I'm actually rendering a video on John Campea, and because I feel there is such a divide between critics and fans. And you see the users go for The Last Jedi, and between critics and users, you have the user score and critic between Alita Battle Angel. You see the Venom even, Venom and Aquaman. people generally liked those movies, but critics just bash those movies. So like there's they kind of look down upon people who the critics. I mean, looking down, and I think that's what actually started GamerGate. Is what these critics believe they're higher and morally superior than the actual gamers because they have access, they have info, they get paid to do this, and just act like they're just better. That's just my interpretation of things. What do you see
No, I
this?
think you're absolutely right. Right? There's two aspects to that. There's actually a few different aspects. There's the aspect of politics, right? A lot of these people are quote unquote woke, and they want to make it clear that they're woke, and they want to like woke movies and give woke movies good reviews. So that's part of it. But also part of it is, I think I talked about this with Charming Man or with Jim, and it's that these people view video games, and not just video games, but all types of media, as being art, which is a positive thing. They should be viewed as art. But at the same time, they think that art means that you have to critique something from a societal or sociocultural perspective. They think that a movie should be hard hitting and really examine what it's like to be in our society, examine the issues in our society, and some works of art can do that. I don't actually have a problem with that. Like you see 1984, for instance, is a critique of what Orwell perceived our society to be going in. You look at the Stonebreakers, the old painting from the late 19th century, right? It was a critique of the working conditions and the lack of economic mobility in the United States at the time, right? You also see this with anime too. Psychopaths, for instance, one of my favorite animes, is a critique of the surveillance state and the nanny state. Or actually, I'm not sure it's so much a critique because it almost looks like a good society, at least on the surface. It's only when you delve in deep that you see the more dystopian elements of it. So you see that a lot of works of art, whether they're movies, video games, comic books, or paintings, right, they can have a deeper philosophical meaning. And that can be wonderful and that could be great. But at the same time, not all works of art have to do that. Not every single movie has to be 1984. Not every single movie has to be something like Inception, where it's very complex, right? Sometimes it's okay to have a movie or a video game that is just, an action shoot 'em up, not much real there. Not much of a story, not much of a deeper philosophical meaning behind it. And that's okay too. And I think different types of things are going to appeal to different people. And that's how it should be. But these critics view these things as being lesser. They want video games to grow up, as they say, right? And you see the thing with movies, right? And Ben Shapiro talked about this, oddly enough, the other day with the Oscars, I think it was, where
Yeah.
the movies that win the Oscars are all these really weird niche movies that nobody heard of. You're not seeing, Infinity War win the Oscars because they view that as being lesser. They view that as being stuff for the chumps. They don't view it as being a work of art in and of itself.
Yeah, and as I said, I mean, people don't go into Transformer movies to have commentary on society. And I would claim that that's also the biggest mistake they did with The Last Jedi, where they tried to use social commentary in a movie that's about fantasy and escapism. And so you have movies where it's not necessary to do these things, and then you can have a more, let's say, the biographic, the biopics, or historical things like World War II movies, or uh, you have Bohemian Rhapsody, which came out last year, or which takes I would say, really good view in Freddie Mercury and Queen and the issues they had, and it's kind of also an issue they had during his time with homophobia and things like that. So it is possible to do both those things. I mean, have movies that just have fun and try to do good writing and good fantasy or whatever they want to do, and then you can also have things that they can have a societal commentary or view or cover things like that. So, but they want to do everything like that.
Well, absolutely. And I think part of the problem is also how they approach these issues, right? So first of all, they're almost always approaching it from more of a left-leaning progressive perspective, which is fine. They can do that. And I don't even necessarily disagree with all of that stuff, right? Like, I did a video on the Orville a couple days ago, where the Orville, in the mold of Star Trek, approaches a lot of social issues and approaches a lot of cultural issues, and they do so in a way that does not insult the audience. You don't see Seth MacFarlane going on Twitter and calling people man babies or anything like that, first and foremost. You don't see him insulting his fans. But then also, on top of that, when he does approach these cultural issues, he does so in a way where he presents both sides, he presents the humanity of both sides, and he tries to explore the nuances of the issue while still also coming down on one side or the other. So he's capable of navigating that in a way that doesn't insult people, that is fair to both sides, but also has a message to it. And I don't see hardly anybody complaining about the Orville, right? You don't see anybody saying, oh, the Orville is an SJW show or anything like that. You saw like a couple of writers like at Vox saying it was an alt-right show or some shit, but they're just clickbait headlines trying to make up shit for clicks. By and large, it's avoided the culture war because they approach things in a way that, regardless of your politics, you can feel like you're not being disrespected.
Yeah, and you have the exact opposite in Star Trek Discovery. Now, I haven't watched this show because like the last time I tried to watch one of these social justice shows was Supergirl. I watched 2 seasons of that garbage, and I just had to give up because I wanted to watch Supergirl in relation to the Arrowverse or the Arrow shows, but they're also declining, and I've just given up on because they have crossovers as well.
Yeah, I remember. Was Arrow? I think Arrow had that episode where it was cringy as hell. They had the female characters come in and save the day, which is fine, right? That's fine. I don't really have a problem with that. But then they're like talking about girl power and we couldn't do, the men couldn't do this or some shit.
That was trash.
Yeah, and well, you said Star Trek Discovery, right? Now I haven't seen season 2 yet, but I saw season 1, and it's actually pretty void of politics. It's actually, I wouldn't say it's great, but it's okay in and of itself. But they did largely avoid political issues, and the issues with the show aren't really related to politics, I'd say. I'd say the issues are related to, namely, one specific character who is annoying as hell and makes you grit your teeth every time you watch it, because they tried to add they put a character in the show who is basically like she acts like a 14-year-old girl and is annoying as hell. And there's also issues with some of the story issues, namely...
Canon.
Oh. So I'd say it did largely avoid that. I think that there was an overreaction. I don't know what the writers said. Maybe they insulted people on Twitter. I don't know, but I do think there was an overreaction on the anti-SJW side to like Star Trek Discovery, for instance.
But I think more people reacted on season 2 than season 1.
Yeah, I haven't seen season 2, so I can't comment on that. So
yeah, it's just I didn't hear much about season 1. It's more I watched people like Doomcock, Mecha Random, that Star Wars girl, those people who and Nerdrotic as well. They cover those shows and they critique them pretty heavily because of the identity politics, and they basically emasculating. I think one of the episodes in the second season, Spark, that Mikey Spark, or the girl, the sister, or whoever it is basically just better than Spark.
I have not seen that, so I can't comment. Sorry.
Well, me neither. It's just my impression because I try to get some. I try to stay up with with topics, so then that's just my impression of things. And I have I'm in the middle of Star Trek Next Generation. I've started. I think believe I'm on season 4. So I really enjoy that show. That show touches on social issues and things like that, philosophical questions as well. So I don't even have any problems with shows or movies touching on this subject. It's just when it becomes preachy, I think that's that's when people just check out.
Well, that's exactly it, right? A lot of these shows and movies, they want to beat you over the head with their message. They want to make it clear that their side is the morally right side, and not just that. That if you hold another viewpoint, that it's not represented in the show, or it's represented by an evil character who's a real bad guy. And so
Yeah.
it's like who's the Nazi guy from Captain America? Hydra, the Hydra guy, Red Skull.
Let's go, yeah.
Like his views, like he'll say some moderate things, like, "Oh, well, that's like a moderate viewpoint that a lot of people might hold." And then, like in the next sentence, he'll talk about, ending all human life on Earth or something. It's like, really? They represent their opponents as these caricatures.
Yeah, basically, and they try to. Not even Republicans or right wingers. It's just anyone right of Stalin. Basically, if they hold any such positions, they're basically evil. That's how it comes off.
Right, and that's not how you. First of all, you're already alienating half the country or half the population. I know you're not American, so I can't say half the country, but half the population is already going to be alienated by that. And second of all, that's not going to get anybody to think about the issues, to reflect on their own viewpoints, and be like, oh, well, that actually made a good point. I hadn't considered that before. It's not going to make anybody do that. It's just going to throw red meat at the people who already agree with them. And then also, it's just bad television. It's bad writing.
Yeah, and also when it comes to journalism, and something you said, people should be able to make their own conclusions of things. And when it comes to news and journalism, which Gamergate basically was founded on, which was the lack of transparency, and basically gamers don't have to be your audience, gamers are dead, which really kicked Gamergate off, is basically, instead of being neutral and people letting create their own conclusions, these journalists make the conclusions themselves and tells everyone this is how it is.
They tell you how you should think. Yes.
Yeah, and just the lack of an ethical approach to these topics that really shouldn't be that hard to be able to discuss. I mean, even though gaming journalism isn't perhaps the most important issue when it comes to journalism itself, politics and news just general might be a little bit more important to be ethical on. But if someone can't be honest about something as easy as Gamergate and present both sides of it, how can they be ethical on more important and more complex issues?
That's absolutely right. If we can't trust these people to represent us, the consumer, fairly, how the hell are we supposed to expect them to represent games fairly? And we've seen that they can't in many cases, right? There's this incestuous nature in the games industry where they're all friends with the people who make these games. And, there's also issues. You were banned from GameSpot forums, were you not? For talking about, was it Metal Gear Solid?
Yeah, I claimed, or I wanted transparency because the Metal Gear Solid 5 review, it was basically a review event, so they had controlled environment, so people didn't know this when they made this review, and so I asked for transparency, and they basically banned me for being persistent and constantly asking for ethical revisement of their site because they had what's the parent company? CNET is owned by, I think it's CBS or something. So GameSpot was using CNET's ethical code of conduct, but they had nowhere in the, because I read the whole thing, and they had nowhere in that in the ethical code of conduct on how they were disclosing things. So first of all, I asked them to revise that and also disclose that they were doing a review event, and they found some ridiculous ridiculous case to just ban me outright, but I know it was because I asked them to be transparent of Metal Gear Solid 5 and the review process, because they basically banned all discussion of Gamergate as well on the forums, even though because they didn't like me talking about ethics in game journalism. So after 11 years there, I got banned. I think it was 2015 I was banned.
Yeah, and I remember they were actually one of the better sites when it came to handling Gamergate, at least at first. They actually had the big mega thread to discuss Gamergate, and that went on for like 2 or 3 years almost.
Yeah.
Up until they banned you.
Yeah, and I know the community manager. I don't know if the community manager is there now in this day and age, but she was basically an SJW, blue-haired feminist who I tried to communicate with, and but in the end, she told me I got banned for offsite uh, behavior. For one thing I said in one of my videos, but I knew it was had to do with Metal Gear Solid 5, and trying to ask them to be transparent. Yeah, and they disclosed this after I got banned as well, because I think people were angry with them.
Yeah, I think I did a video about that controversy, or maybe it was in This Week in Gamergate. I briefly touched upon it anyway.
Yeah, I got kind of angry because I was the most active user on the forum, and they just banned me for asking for something as simple as disclosing things and being being basically better. Yeah, the last Gogeta, yeah, I was banned for offside behavior, but I know that that's not the reason. Somehow they found my YouTube channel, and I was criticizing the mods because they were constantly banning threads that they didn't like, and they were basically out of control, and said, yeah. She just posted the video and then said I was banned. That was basically it. I didn't get any explanation. I couldn't appeal or anything like that. I was just banned like that. And all I was trying to do was make this out better, basically.
All right, just a heads up. I do have to go in about 30 minutes or so. Just heads up.
Yeah.
If there's anything you wanted to talk about, or if you wanted to take questions from the chat or anything.
Yeah, I'm seeing the chat because they mentioned Jeff Gersman and Mass Effect 3, Elasco Gogeta, as it kind of started with that. Would you agree with that assessment?
Oh, in regards to GameSpot in particular, or
Gamergate, just Gamergate.
well, I mean, Jeff Gersman was a while back. That was like 2011 or 12, wasn't it?
No, 2008, I think.
Oh wow. I'm sure that there were plenty of issues with games journalism well before that, but that was probably the most high-profile case prior to Gamergate of there being a clear-cut case of corruption.
Yeah,
I do cover that in the book too, in chapter 2, I believe.
Yeah, and Mass Effect 3 with Colin, what's his name? The guy from IGN and Kind of Funny, who made his own Colin something. And
that was a huge issue. Go ahead, sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
No, it's just he basically called Gamers Entitled with Mass Effect 3 on IGN.
Yes, that was probably the first major sign that there was a huge disconnect between the gamers and the games press. The fact that they took people's justifiable, I'd say, outrage and disappointment with Mass Effect 3's ending, which was a terrible ending. I've talked about it on my channel. That was one of the most disappointing endings of all time, where you have 3 choices that are all basically exactly the same, where the cinematics are all basically exactly the same. They just changed the color tints and maybe a couple of minor details, right? That was a huge disappointment to a lot of fans. And then we were called entitled man babies, entitled children, because we expected more from a product, when that is just consumers expressing their disappointment. That is just consumers who have been heavily invested in this franchise, right? People would play Mass Effect in the series, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. Like there are people who probably played over a dozen playthroughs of the game just to see all the different options and combinations they can do, and because they really enjoyed the story. They spent hundreds of hours in this franchise, and they expected the last game in the series to be a good product, and they were disappointed when it wasn't. Well, I think Mass Effect 3 was a good game, except for the ending, I would say.
In last minutes. Yeah, I was about to say Colin Moriarty. Yeah, I remember the name, but the last go Gita also remember the name. But he said he became better, but I would disagree with that. In regards to GameSpot and that community manager, so I'm on Twitter. I'm both blocked of GameSpot and the community manager's Twitter, even though I've never tweeted either of them. And Colin Moriarty also blocked me for saying because he was being I would say petulant child on Twitter, basically making fun of Xbox or something like that for having 720. I can't remember the context, and I said, shouldn't you have a little higher standards as a journalist than to mock fans and developers and also company? And he said to me, "I'm not your journalist," and I sent him the definition of a journalist, and he blocked me. And he also went on Dave Rubin to bash Gamergate, that we were basically a Rockman campaign as well. So
yeah, I think he was a little bit more nuanced in his take on the Rubin report, if I recall, but he did basically say that. I do want to have a conversation with him at some point, because he does seem like he's more open to dialogue and open to being reasoned with. So he should talk to someone from Gamergate at some point. I'd like to reach out to him and have that conversation.
I can't reach out to him because he blocked me, but I mean, I still think he's dead wrong on that. He was twice on. I think both times he said that Gamergate was basically a harassment campaign. If he's changed his mind now, that's good for him. I haven't checked out his channel because he got ostracized from Kind of Funny Games because he made a international International Women's Day. He made a joke about being that it was so quiet at the home because
yeah, I remember that.
And he got ostracized and had to apologize for making a joke. Now that is stupid. Now I don't like him at all, as I've said. He might have changed, but that was ridiculous. The witch hunt that he got exposed to, that is ridiculous.
Well, hey, this is sort of another issue of somebody supposedly changing their mind and changing their politics. And this is more recent, but what are your thoughts on Wozlee's video? Have you seen that?
Which one?
The most recent one he just did about Gamergate, like 3 days ago.
No.
Charming Man just did a response video. Go ahead, sorry.
No, I haven't seen his videos in my timeline, so I didn't even know he had made a video.
Well, he's anti-Gamergate now. He's criticized the movement. He did. I think he was mostly fair. He tried to understand what Gamergaters were interested in, why they were upset, and he did present that perspective and that viewpoint. But then he also basically said the entire thing was bullshit.
Yeah. I mean, I would have to watch the video to make an assessment, but I mean, Wozlee has been going kind of down the SGW route that I would say the last year or so, but his videos haven't popped up. Maybe I'm unsubscribed. I don't know. I haven't checked, but yeah, that would be kind of sad to see someone just being ideologically enveloped and stopping to look at things critically. Look, I can be wrong sometimes, but I'm willing to actually talk to people and examine things.
Yeah, I reached out to him and I haven't heard back yet. Twitter says he hasn't seen the message yet, so hopefully he'll get back to me and we can have a conversation about that video and what exactly made him change his view on Gamergate. All these years later, after being such a staunch supporter for so long, I do want to have that conversation with him, but I'm not sure he's going to be open to it. He was very upset with Charming Man when Charming Man Mitch did his video, and he was mocking him on Twitter. But to be fair, Charming Man was kind of rude in the video. He said, "You're rambling." He kind of was, but
Yeah, he's a little bit hyperbolic sometimes, but I really like Charming Man. He's a good dude.
well, if I do get in touch with Wasley and I have a conversation with him, I can point him in your direction if you want to talk to him too, and we can sort of figure out where he's coming from, because I want to give him charity. He did present Gamergate more fairly than 99% of the people opposed to Gamergate. He did try to present both sides as fairly as possible, and he knows a lot of the people involved. So I do want to give him charity. I do want to assume that he went in with the best of intentions, that he's become disillusioned, and that there's an understandable reason here that he has a more nuanced take than maybe he presented in that video. I do want to believe that. I do want to reach out to him, and I do want to have that conversation. I don't want to jump in and assume, oh, he's just a horrible SJW now. Oh, he's just an idiot. He's a traitor. I don't want to assume that. I don't want to jump in and make those assumptions. I want to talk to him first, hear what he has to say.
Yeah, I would have to watch the video and then maybe do a response to it. And if he wants to have a conversation, I would be willing. But now I'm going to do my part 2 on the John Campia video, so I'm busy with that. But yeah, I would probably have to check that out. I have a question here from Razor X Gamer. With NPCs at every form of medium and the decline of AAA games or AAA games, thoughts on the industry going forward? We can kind of leave with this since you have to go in not too long, so we can kind of have this as a big closing statement. What do you think of AAA games going forward?
Well, I'm not really sure I can speak in an informed manner about that, to be honest. I don't have insight in the industry, and also maybe I'm kind of a weird gamer because I don't usually buy new games. Like I'll usually wait a couple of years before I pick up a game. So by that point, the community has already more or less decided this is a good game, this is a bad game, and the verdict is out, right? And I don't really go out there and pay attention to E3. I don't go out there and pay attention to PAX and see all these big game previews, big game releases. But, I'd say I'm pretty optimistic, right? I know a lot of people are upset with the state of AAA games, and I definitely understand that. You see a lot of microtransactions. You see a lot of just a decline in quality. But there's also a lot of really good games being made, too. For instance, two of the most recent games I've bought were Ace Combat 7, which was amazing. I do think that they should have fleshed out the story more, but the gameplay was as fun as ever, and there wasn't really any issues with politics. So Ace Combat is a political game, so I shouldn't say that. The story is political, but there's no like SJW stuff or anything like that in the game. And also, I played Resident Evil 2 Remake, which was amazing, completely faithful to the original game, except for the gameplay style, which they changed over the shoulder. But even that works really well within the franchise. So there's a lot of really good games still being made, and if you want to see them make more good games, let the developers know you like it, and also, vote with your wallet. Buy the games that interest you. Buy the games that are in line with what you want from a game. And if you're upset with Battlefield 5 or what have you, then don't buy that, and it will be a commercial failure. And then the developer will realize, hey, wait a second, maybe we made a mistake. Maybe we overreacted. Maybe we did something wrong, and we can fix that in the future.
Yeah, it's very interesting you mentioned Resident Evil 2 and Ace Combat because both of the reviews of IGN of those games got knocked into oblivion. First of all, the Ace Combat review, because the developer played the game on easy mode.
I played on easy mode too. It's not an easy franchise to get into. It's a very tough game. I don't blame the reviewer for that, to be honest.
Yeah,
it's tough.
Yeah, but not even trying to. There's a difference between you. someone playing this and someone getting paid to review. So you would actually have to try to get good at the game.
That's true.
And then you have the. I mean, do we have to do the and mention the Takahashi debacle with Cuphead? I mean, Jesus Christ. Um, and then you have the Resident Evil 2 review of from IGN that didn't review the game properly because for those who haven't played the game, there's two modes. You can play through the game one way with either character, and then play through it again with the other character with a different view. And the Damon Hatfield, who reviewed the game, basically played the same mode twice and said he felt like he was playing the same game twice, even though he chose the wrong mode. So basically,
Yeah, but to be fair though, if you go on like the Resident Evil subreddit, like people there are pissed too. Like one of the main things that they complained about was that there are two different modes. You're right. There's the A scenario and the B scenario, but they didn't make a whole lot of changes. Like in the original Resident Evil 2, there were pretty drastic changes between the A scenario and the B scenario. In this, they made some changes, but mostly it's the same. So that was something a lot of people actually were kind of upset about.
but that's a fair critique. But playing the same mode twice.
Yeah, that's idiotic. That's them fucking up and not. I mean, how do you even make that mistake? I don't even know how you could possibly fuck it up that bad.
Yeah, because he was saying it was just the same puzzle and didn't understand why. So, but when it comes to the games industry, I'm as optimistic, if not more optimistic than you, because if you look at Diablo Immortal, Blizzard crashed, the stock crashed, EA Battlefield 5, it crashed, and also because of a consequence of Battlefront 2. You have EA stock crashing as well because of the issues. You have countries legislating against loot boxes with FIFA, so it's illegal to do loot boxes without disclosing things like, and it's banned now with FIFA in Belgium, and I actually look at it in a positive way because people aren't buying these games anymore. I believe COD is also going to go in a negative direction because they're now asking for microtransactions for dotted sites, red dot sites. I mean, Jesus Christ, what the hell is Activision doing? And we see games like Cuphead, we see smaller games being innovative. And I mean, EA took a chance, and what's the game called from the Swedish guy who said "fuck the Oscars"? A Way Out. That sold like 2 million within a week, which was ridiculous. So people want new experience and are voting with their wallet. And I mean, Ubisoft has improved drastically. They botched Rainbow Six at launch. Now it's one of the biggest games in the world. And goddamn, my cat is jumping on the handle of the door. That's why there's a little bit of noise. Anyways, they fixed Assassin's Creed, fixed in quotation mark. They don't release it annually anymore. I liked Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Origins, and I think it's gonna become better within the industry in the future. The only thing is that you can't rely on games journalists to review these games properly. You have to rely on people like Angry Joe or regular gamers to give you impressions and reviews of the game. That's probably my biggest concern. Probably is still to this day is journalism.
We're probably seeing not probably, we are seeing games journalism die, and it's being replaced with YouTubers, with streamers, so on and so forth. Because first off, you can see the game right then and there. You can see what the gameplay is like. You can see what the story is like. You know what it's like going in. You know, you don't really know what the control scheme is like, whether or not the controls are shit. But you also have these people who are YouTubers and streamers who are supposedly more honest, right? They have the appearance of being more honest. But also, I think there might be an issue moving forward with these YouTubers and the Twitch streamers and so on and so forth about these games, because as they become bigger and as they replace more and more of the games press, we're probably going to be seeing more and more, corruption. We're going to be seeing more and more of these people getting special treatment from the publishers, so on and so forth, and trying to be more positive about the games than they might have otherwise been. And also, it's kind of incestuous, right? Because when you're talking about IGN or GameSpot, you're talking about a publication where you don't really have a personal connection with the games journalists, most likely. You don't really have a personal connection with them. But with the streamers and YouTubers, right, they have the impression of being your friend. They're your friend, right? That's what they want to promote. That's how they build an audience. And so it's going to be a lot harder for people to spot when their supposed friends end up acting in pretty corrupt or suspicious ways.
Yeah, and the last Gogeta says anime journalism was dying until they changed things up. So, yeah, I think the things just have to change. But I'm not gonna keep it that much more longer. I think we've covered things pretty much. We could probably do a stream a little bit down the line when your book is done and things have calmed a little bit, and see the reception of your book, and you've edited and all of that. So, yeah, is there any closing statements you want to say?
No, I think that's about it. Unless anyone in the chat had any final questions, let me give them a second.
Yeah, well, if there are any questions in regards to Merely Forever, aka Netscape, for those who don't know that, is there any are there any questions for him regarding the book or anything like that? Are traps gay?
I think you ask this every time. Sure, they're gay.
Okay.
That's the third time I've gotten that question. I think from you, last Gogeta. Gogeta, sorry.
PC or next generation consoles from Razer X Gamer?
Well, I mean, obviously PC is going to be superior, but at the same time, I'm a poor fag. I really am. I don't I don't have a lot of money, so I don't see myself buying some $2,000 gaming laptop or building one myself in the near future. Or not laptop, but computer in the future. So I'll probably stick with consoles for now, and then mostly play like old games like StarCraft and stuff on my PC.
Yeah, I'm actually the same. So I have an 8-year-old PC. It was a beast back then, but now it's basically you can get a laptop that's more powerful than my regular PC. So I'm probably gonna stick to Xbox or PS5 or whatever they're gonna call them. So yeah, probably next gen. But PC is a way to go if you have the time and money for doing so. You get the superior product. But for those who don't have the extra cash to splash on new rig, yeah.
Well, and to quote EA, right? To quote EA, when you build a PC, it fills you with a sense of pride and accomplishment.
Oh yeah, you wanted me to answer the are traps gay? Yeah, I say traps are gay, even though there might be some signs. But if you're into a dude and having sex with a dude, you're pretty much gay.
To be fair, it can be tough sometimes. You see, have you seen Steins Gate?
If you're in bed and then you find out it's a dude and you don't care, then you're pretty much gay.
Well, have you seen Steins Gate in it at all?
No.
Oh, well, there's this character, super cute, and then you find out like towards the end of season 1, or I guess the only season, that it's actually a guy. It's like, oh my god, you got me.
Yeah, I mean, you might present yourself as female. Presenting yourself as female, I mean, you can be into that. But if you're into that person after you find out, a person is a trap, then you're pretty much gay. Yeah, I would say so. Anyways, I think that's pretty much it. I put your links in the description, so if people want to check out your videos or streams or whatever, they can do so. Yeah, thank you guys for watching, and see you guys next time.
Yep,
Bye.
thanks.